Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy freaking Thursday, everybody. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It's a great day to be great. And it's a great day to go through the biggest ranking questions ahead of week 3. So get those minds right. We got some fantasy matchups to win. And joining me, as always, in this edition of the Fantasy Life Show, Fantasy Life's finest, Matthew Freedman, and of course, Dwain, the Rock McFarland. And Dwain, thank you for catching my, mishap, I would say, to put it lightly, on our waiver wire yesterday when I almost dropped Malik Neighbors for Deontay Foreman.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a great move as I was going in. Ian and I, we have a partnership. Like, he takes the first pass through, I come back through and look at the bids and everything, and then we kind of talk about it. Well, when I saw that one, I was like, okay, like, what was Hartitz doing? I hope that you were in the middle of the most intense, insane workout ever. And like, maybe that was some sweat on the phone or something, because when I saw Malik Neighbors getting dropped for Deontay Foreman, I'm not going to lie. Like, I think I may have peed on myself.
I do indeed do all my waivers.
It's better as it goes along until it doesn't. And that point comes just a little bit after Thanksgiving where, like, you're just ready for the Cowboys to be done. You know what I'm saying?
As always, appreciate starting off the show with such optimism about life in general, Freedman. So again, guys, plenty of rankings goodness to get to today. But first, going to go through some of the news that, again, we did have happen on Wednesday, mostly a bunch of injury updates. So guys, some players practicing in full and accordingly expected to play this week. We do have Amon-Ra St. Brown and also Colts slot receiver Josh Downs, someone, Dwayne, who was getting a ton of hype during training camp, now going to make his season debut here in week 3 against the Bears. So how do you think the insertion of Downs will impact Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, and the rest of this Colts passing game?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because really we've had Alec Pierce in a full-time role, Ian, right now sitting in an 89% route participation. He's been an absolute surprise. I mean, 17% and 25% target shares over the first 2 games, averaging 19.1 fantasy points. It's funny how we all talk about Jamison Williams and Rashid Shaheed, and no one talks about Alec Pierce because he hasn't shown us anything in the first 2 years, but he's suddenly here. Like, so he's a force. But is this going to eat in his playing time? Because we also have Adonai Mitchell, who rotates a little bit in and out of the game with Pierce, but mostly it's been Pierce in the 2 wide receiver sets. So Mitchell, I think, is the one that's most at risk here, Ian, because he's been running from the slot. He's also had some near huge games. We talked about week 1. He was one of the main staples of your Sheesh report. He had at least 2 missed touchdowns, another potential chunk play that might have gone for a touchdown. So I feel like it's probably going to impact him the most, but it probably impacts all of them a little bit. I think it is a good thing ultimately for Anthony Richardson if, obviously Richardson, you're going to have to be a little bit more accurate, but he does have a good connection with Pierce early last season. Josh Downs and Anthony Richardson, like, they had a nice little vibe going. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't think he suddenly turns Richardson into a 60% passer or anything, Ian, which is not saying a whole lot, but it's still going to be good overall for the Colts passing game. But I think it's a slight downgrade to Pierce and to Mitchell until we see what happens. I think Pittman's pretty much locked into his role.
Meanwhile, we do have a handful of players practicing in a limited fashion, which seemingly puts them on track to suit up this weekend, but we would like to get that, again, full session in before knowing for sure. Specifically, Jordan Love back in action, said that he is hopeful we can get to the point where he can get there, but we're just going to take it day by day. Also, Dolphins running backs Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson dealing with chest and hip injuries, respectively. Aaron Jones with a hip, Justin Jefferson with the quad, and Jake Ferguson with the knee, seemingly on track to return after missing just 1 week. So, Freeman, the big surprise here is Jordan Love, someone that we thought was not going to be back until week 5 at the earliest, now seemingly has a chance for week 3. Still doesn't seem like a certainty by any stretch of the imagination. But if we do see Jordan Love out there, Freeman, are you going to be expecting a lesser version of him, or how would you approach that?
Yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical that we see him out there. The market has moved in the direction of the Packers, though, as if there actually is a chance he plays. And if he plays, I think we see him pretty much close to his full self, especially as a passer. I think slightly diminished as a runner, maybe not able to navigate the pocket quite as well, but I think he would basically be like 95% of Jordan Love.
Obviously, great game plan by LaFleur and company with Malik Willis under center. Ran the absolute hell out of the football. So, regardless of who is under center, LaFleur is going to put that team in a position to win. Gotta love that. Now, some players that were not practicing on Wednesday still have some time to get ready, but certainly not an ideal way to kick off the week. We did have Justin Herbert with an ankle injury, but Rap Sheet did say that signs point to yes, that he's playing this week. Kenneth Walker still missing practice with an oblique injury, setting up Zach Charbonnet for another workhorse role. Maybe, just maybe, he can be a little more efficient with with it this time around. Both Texans running backs and Joe Mixon with an ankle and Dameon Pierce with a hamstring not practicing. We have Tajay Spears not practicing with an ankle, albeit he did say he's playing this week. Pierre Strong Jr. without a hamstring could condense that Browns backfield into two. CeeDee Lamb not practicing with an ankle injury, but he is supposed to be fine. Nothing major per Tom Pelissero. A.J. Brown with a hamstring. DK Metcalf with a hand. It doesn't seem overly serious. Nico Collins with a hip and foot injury not practicing. Keep an eye on that. Jordan Addison, Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, and David Njoku rounding out the DMPs from Wednesday. So, Dwayne, I think, again, we kind of have a read on these situations regardless of who is going to end up, what's going to happen to this backfield if both Mixon and Pierce are out, and maybe, just maybe, someone that we adored in the preseason, Cam Akers, actually gets a chance to run away with the starting job, even if it's just for a week.
Yeah, so with Akers, like, he was a guy from a waiver wire perspective, and if he's still sitting out there for you guys, when people were losing their minds on Carson Steele, dropping half their fab, like getting Akers for like 2 or 3%. Of your fab, like that's an absolute steal, guys. And it's looking like you're going to get a chance to put him in your lineup this weekend. Like if we don't have Joe Mixon, if we don't have Dameon Pierce, I would be hard pressed, Ian, to rank Cam Akers probably outside the top 17 or 18 running backs. And he would carry running back one upside. It's not a great matchup against Minnesota. They've actually been pretty good against the run. Cam Akers looked good last week until he fumbled when he came in for Joe Mixon. So that's another thing, like how much of the coach is going to trust him. Obviously, last week after that, they benched him. He didn't come back on the field. It was Ogunbowale. I think they'll put Akers back in to start the game just because he is way better than Dario Ogunbowale. Sorry, Ogunbowale family. Your son is out here earning an NFL living as a third down back, and he has staying power. Ian's been talking about this guy since I met the guy. So Ogunbowale, hat tip to you. He probably takes the passing down stuff, but I think that all the early down work would go to Akers unless, he has a missteps. But still, we can't plan on him fumbling. So I would say mid-range running back 2. And I think if he plays really well, he probably ices Dameon Pierce. Like, I think it's right there already. I just feel like he's so much better than Dameon Pierce. If he has a really good game, I think he catapults into running back 2. And now you've got the ultimate handcuff to Joe Mixon for the rest of the season moving forward. And maybe another start on the way. That was a pretty bad ankle injury. I know Mixon tried to come in, but that was pretty gruesome looking.
We see this a lot of times, Dwayne, with the adrenaline where the guy gets hurt and they come back in for a couple plays. Cooper Kupp just did it, and now he's wearing a cast and could be missing several weeks of action. So certainly could be a nice little find there on the waiver wire in the form of Cam Akers. Last main point I want to talk about, guys, is ahead of a riveting Thursday night football matchup, because I like my Thursday night football bad, and boy, do we have a good one for that. Patriots at the Jets. Jets sitting as 6-point favorites. A lowly game total of just 38.5, though, after opening at 42. And Freedman, the big injury news with this game is just a Patriots offensive line that I don't think any of us thought highly of to begin with is now likely going to be playing a lot of backups because they're starting left tackle and left guard have already been ruled out, and center David Andrews as well as right tackle Mike Onwenu are questionable. So any big, just I guess changes to projections you're making, Freedman, or any prop bets perhaps you like, given how decimated this Patriots offensive line is?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most American things someone can do is bet the over on Thursday Night Football, but not this evening. This is a game that just screams under. You've got divisional rivals playing on short rest, 2 strong defenses going against offenses that probably want to run the ball, and with the Jets offense really not close to its full form yet. I have this projected at 36.1. The line right now in the market is 38.5, so one of my favorite bets of the week is going under. I think it's going to be a pretty ugly Thursday Night Football game. I feel like we say that every Thursday and people start to complain about it, but it's football. It's going to be ugly. I will probably still be watching it.
We had the Bills-Dolphins on last week, and that's what threw us all for a loop. But yeah, come on, give me some of that ugliness. It's certainly better than no football out there, something I know we can all agree on there. So that's the news, everyone. Now we got some rankings talk, but first, a quick word to our friends over at Homage. Guys, Homage just makes some fantastic t-shirts at the end of the day. That's what they're all about. And accordingly, we are rocking some here on the Fantasy Life Show. YouTube can see my Brian Dawkins Weapon X jersey. Dwayne's rocking the Earl Campbell. Love those old school Oilers colors. And Freedman, you have used our fantastic connection to just continue to stock your closet with Cowboys tees, which, cannot blame you there. But anyway, guys, calling all fantasy football fanatics, the season is finally here. And while you may be stressing about start-sit decisions, waiver wire pickups and what trade targets could give you an edge this season, at least one thing is for sure, Homage is the place to go for your fantasy football gear this season. Homage is super soft, ultra comfortable, can't confirm. NFL player apparel is a first-round pick that is sure to make your fellow managers jealous and allow you to glow in style all season long. From past stat-stuffing legends to the current crop of fantasy studs helping you secure this year's championship, they've got everything you need to gear up for the new season. Check out homage.com/fantasy. That's HOMAGE.com/fantasy to reveal their top-ranked officially licensed player tees so you can rep your fantasy team with pride. Be sure to use promo code LIFE for an exclusive discount for Fantasy Life listeners. Pay homage. It's Rankings Thursday, gentlemen, which means we're going through our riser, our faller, Freedman's favorite, and Dwain's sicko start of the week. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. And accordingly, guys, let's get after it, kicking things off with our quarterback riser. And yeah, you guys can probably guess it. Derek Carr can't go freaking down the street without neighbors telling you how great the Saints offense and Clint Kubiak are these days. So, Dwain, talk about how high you are rising Derek Carr, because he's playing like the best quarterback in the league, but are we really treating him as one of the best pocket passers like the Mahomes or CJ Stroud, or maybe a little bit more so in that Jared Goff, Joe Burrow range of things?
Yeah, more in that Jared Goff, Joe Burrow range, like he's that true pocket passer. But I think we have to react. Spent a lot of fab money last night on Derek Carr. And the reason why is Clint Kubiak, we're believers in what he's doing. Like the cheat code buttons that he's pushing, Ian, have been working for the last 3 seasons. So there is sustainable success that can be had from the way that they're operating this offense. They've obviously got to stay healthy, but right now Derek Carr's averaging 22 fantasy points per game, and he hasn't had to lift a finger in the second half of a football game yet because they've been destroying everyone. So while the efficiency is probably going to come down some, it's probably not going to regress to the mean that many people are thinking. There's a new mean in town for the New Orleans Saints, and that's what we got to figure out. What's the actual mean for this team, right? It's not going to be back to the NFL average, guys, and we've seen this with guys like Brock Purdy. We've seen this with players in this scheme and how much it can matter. We've even seen Matthew Stafford have that explosion year a few years back under Sean McVay. So it looks like we're going to have one of those kind of years. I'm thinking that the closest thing I can think to this, Ian, is probably going back to, I think it's 2016 Atlanta, when Matt Ryan went bonkers in a similar kind of role under Kyle Shanahan, was the QB 2 or 3 that year. Everybody kept thinking, oh no, this can't happen. This can't happen. It happened all year long. So I think you got to get on board with this. I have him as my QB 10 this weekend. So I definitely look at him as a low end quarterback 1 the rest of the way, but you've got a nice matchup here, against the Eagles, who we thought maybe they fixed their secondary. No, they haven't. Their secondary is still terrible. They've got an offense that won't have AJ Brown most likely, but it's still going to be good enough to stay in the game, hopefully, and push the Saints. If we ever get a game where Derek Carr's got to actually play in the second half and throw the ball in, we're probably looking at a 300-yard passing game. So I want to be in on Carr, whether that's the waiver wire, and definitely in my starting lineups this week. I would put him in over Fields. I'd put him in over Purdy. Well, you guys can go check out the Fantasy Life ranks, and you can read for yourself. The other 9 quarterbacks I would start ahead of Derek Carr. Everyone else is behind him.
As Dwain said, Derek Carr, his QB 10, my QB 13, Freedman QB 12. So we are all pretty much on the same page with him as a borderline QB 1. But my God, Freedman, I mean, we're talking about a guy that is first in the EPA per dropback, first in CPOE, PFF pass grade, passer rating, yards per attempt. At what point do you start looking at this and, to Dwain's, Matt Ryan example, say, hey, this is looking like one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league on a team that right now is sure looking like someone that can make the playoffs? I can't believe I'm saying this, Freedman, but are Derek Carr MVP odds something that you're interested in right now?
Give me one more week. I'm not going to jump off of that mountain just yet, but I will say it's been super impressive what we've seen to this point. And the big thing, and Dwain mentioned this, is that it's not just random in terms of he's been hot. It's that they are scheming things wide open. It's a top-down type of change in that you have Clint Kubiak there, who is pressing buttons. Last year they were number 32 in play action rate. This year they're number 1. They are just making life easy on Derek Carr. Some of that has been the matchups, right? Week 1 going against the Panthers, that hardly counts. Week 2, Kubiak going against Mike Zimmer, whose defense he knows from the time he spent with him in Minnesota. This week, another great matchup going against the Eagles, who are number 29 in defensive pass DVOA last year, who had 3 new cornerbacks in that system, or 3 new starters rather in the system, and on short rest coming off of Monday Night Football. I mean, Derek Carr, if he was on waivers earlier this week, he's probably not now. I imagine everyone has grabbed him up for at least one more week. I think he continues just absolutely to crush.
Literally 3 or 4 weeks ago, people were calling out for Spencer Rattler to get this job. Funny how quickly things can change in the NFL. All right, guys, Derek Carr, the riser, but we have a faller here, and that is going to be Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford. And Dwayne doesn't have anything to do with Stafford, but you know what? When you take away any quarterback's top 2 wide receivers and decimate their offensive line, yeah, kind of hard to be overly excited about him in fantasy land.
Yeah, this one's really straightforward. Look, Stafford's been good. He's averaging 267 yards per game right now through the air. That's the second best in the NFL. But when you lose Puka Nacua in week 1 and then you lose Cooper Kupp in week 2, that's really going to hurt. They've also had offensive line challenges. Now they are getting back a tackle this week. So maybe the offensive line is in neutral at least and not just in a complete downward spiral. But when you look at the wide receiver room, we've got Demarcus Robinson. Okay, we've got Tyler Johnson. We've got Jordan Whittington, who we'll talk about a little bit later. But this feels like if you guys saw the movie Major League back in the day, it's like, who are these guys? And the other guy's like, this guy here's dead. And he's like, well, mark him off. Like, find someone else to run out there. Like, these are not high-end wide receivers. So when you look at it, it's going to be tough for Stafford. You're still going to see McVay scheme some things up because that's what McVay does. He's going to make more out of this than what most people would think he would be able to. And you still have Stafford, so that's nice. But, man, I'm benching him. I've moved him to low-end QB2 territory. That means I'm starting Justin Fields, Aaron Rodgers, Geno Smith, Kirk Cousins, all those guys over him. And honestly, I think when you get to a name like Gardner Minshew, I'm probably leaning Gardner Minshew. I at least know that he has Devontae Adams. He has Brock Bowers. He has guys that can really help him out. For Stafford, everything is going to rest on his shoulders. So he gets a major downgrade this week. In fact, he can be cut off of fantasy rosters for now. Because quarterbacks, it's a onesie position. You can probably circle back to him in 2 or 3 weeks if we know that Cooper Kupp is going to be back, and then you can add him back to the squad.
I tried to find him in our ranks, and I actually had to hit the next 25 button. And anyone that's ever been in that hellhole on the waiver wire knows nothing ever happens when you have to hit nothing good ever happens, I should say, when you have to hit the next 25 button and anything related to fantasy football. So, yeah, Freeman, look, it's one of these situations where I think going into the year, we were excited about the environment. But as things stand right now with my supporting cast rating, again, PFF average grades in rushing, receiving, pass blocking, and run blocking, only the Broncos and Raiders right now have offered worse supporting cast than the Rams, and honestly that Raiders number being skewed by a little something. So yeah, not great for Matthew Stafford right now, Freeman.
Yeah, not great, Bob. The thing is, as Dwayne mentioned, he's got all the yards, but it's like empty calories. He's not going to have all the touchdowns to go along with it because they are just not going to be able to score points. Because I'm that kind of sicko. 7.5 just feels like too much, but in general, I don't expect great things for Stafford. I don't expect a lot of points.
How is 7.5 too much, Freeman, when they don't have either playmaker? Genuine question here. You are a better than me. So I'm just asking for the people. I feel like it would be a slam. I don't know that I would want to bet the Niners, but that feels like a good line to me.
Well, look, I don't know if I am a better than you. Week 2, I got my teeth kicked in, but I would say that you have the 49ers without Christian McCaffrey, without Deebo Samuel, some defensive issues. The Rams at least are getting back some of their offensive linemen. Things are never quite as bad as they seem. And it's 2 division rivals who know each other well. Games in division tend to play just a little bit tighter.
All right, let's do a show bet. I'll just go ahead and do it here. I'll take the 49ers to cover, and Freeman, gets the Rams. I don't know what we're betting on yet, but I'm sure that producer Swing he'll think of something interesting once he knows which one of us loses.
That's good.
Public embarrassment always seems to get the job done in some way, shape, or form. So looking forward to seeing that from you guys. Big point here, though. Again, fix that offensive line, please, because right now the Rams, 29.2 PFF pass blocking grade. That is so far in last. The next lowest graded team is the Seahawks at 53.3. So, yeah, let's try to protect Stafford and Kyren Williams as well. More on him in just a little bit. Guys, it is time for Freeman's favorite, Mr. Ride or Die himself, Kyler Murray. Freeman offense has been cooking this season for the Cardinals, both in the run and pass game, and accordingly their quarterback putting all kinds of fantasy goodness up. Currently one of only 5 quarterbacks in NFL history averaging 20 plus fantasy points per game for their career. Sounds like you think the good times are going to keep on rolling.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has seen what Murray has been able to do to this point in the year, and I think it continues because week 3 going against the Lions, who have not looked all that good to this point. In week 1, 317 yards passing allowed to Matthew Stafford. Last week, they got bakered in a home loss. And then last season, number 3 in most fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. Now they have rebuilt their secondary. Maybe at some point that means their secondary improves, but right now they have 3 new starting cornerbacks and they've moved Brian Branch from slot to safety. So it is just a totally reconstructed unit back there. And I think that means that they struggle with communication. They have a rookie back there who's also injured. It's not a good situation. And then Murray on his own, he's just looked fantastic. 428 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, 9.8 adjusted yards per attempt. And then he looks all the way back as a runner too. 116 yards rushing to this point. We've seen what he's been able to do navigating the pocket, escaping, extending plays, giving his guys a chance to get open downfield. I have a bet on the Cardinals this week at +4.5. And I will say, I do have a ticket on them 100-1. It's not going to happen, but 100-1 to be the number 1 seed in the NFC. Let's just keep the good vibes going for the Cardinals, because if that ticket hits, I'm retiring.
We heard it here first, everyone. Come on, Cardinals, 100-1.
You seem a little too excited about that retirement statement.
Dude, I can't believe that he, backed off on the Derek Carr MVP talks, but then in the next sentence, we get a Cardinals number 1 seed, coming out here. So we'll see what happens. As Dwain stated, Freedman's a better than him, and certainly better than your boy over here. So we'll listen to the king, but yeah, can't say enough good things about this matchup. The Lions have some talent. We obviously saw Aiden Hutchinson eating Baker Mayfield's lunch, for the entirety of last week. They're the number 3 defense in havoc rate right now, but really emerging once again as one of the more pass funnel heavy defenses in the league. They've allowed the 6th most passing yards overall and the 4th fewest rushing yards. Yeah, teams look at that secondary and they say we're going to attack. So hopefully bigger days ahead for Marvin Harrison Jr., Greg Dortch, Trey McBride, and company, in that order, of course. All right, Dwain, time for your sicko start of the week. I'm not sure how your week 2 ones did, but I know week 1 was on fire. So let's focus on the positives and assume these are going to be great too. Talk to us about Aaron Rodgers, someone who, doesn't look quite as, fleet-footed these days following the Achilles tear, but certainly that arm strength doesn't look to be gone. And now, reasonable enough matchup here.
Yeah, well, look, we're 2 for 2. Sam Darnold was a hit in week 1. And last week we said, we think there's a way Daniel Jones claws out 18 fantasy points against the Commanders, and he has some upside from there. He scored 18 fantasy points. So we're 2 for 2 at quarterback on the sickos if you had to use them. Aaron Rodgers is more of a household name, right, than those 2 guys. I mean, obviously you know who Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones are, but you think of them as first-round flops as quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers is a guy that, many consider to be one of the top 2 to 3 quarterbacks to play the game in the last 20 years. I think he's definitely in that conversation. Maybe you're going to put Tom Brady obviously above him. Patrick Mahomes is above him. But right after that, I think Aaron Rodgers is the name that you're looking at. And here's the problem for Aaron Rodgers. It's called Nathaniel Hackett. If Clint Kubiak's out here just, pulling 777s every time he pulls any lever, Nathaniel Hackett is the cooler that comes up. You're at the craps table in Vegas. Everybody's running hot, and just they immediately come up and crap out, and the whole table dies. It's like this town that arose out of nowhere, back in the oil boom days, that all of a sudden the oil dries up and like the town's gone, right? It's just a ghost town. That's Nathaniel Hackett. When Nathaniel Hackett enters a room and he takes over an offense, it's bad. So Rodgers, for the love of God, don't listen to this man. Just roll your own dice. Don't let this man roll your dice. But you do have a good matchup tonight. Now, it's Thursday night football. So that's what made it iffy. And honestly, that's what allowed me to qualify it as a sicko start, is because I'm actually telling you to go with a player that's on Thursday night. But whenever you look at the Patriots, they've given up the eighth most passing yards per game. You just look at their secondary on paper. There's really not a lot here. And they've been pretty good against the ground game. We're still early in the season, so these things aren't like super predictive, but they've only given up 58 rushing yards per game on the ground. So there's the opportunity here for a funnel. The Jets have been able to really lean into Breece Hall. But if you take a little bit away from him, that's going to lead to Aaron Rodgers. And look, I'm still just a believer, Ian, and Garrett Wilson. I think Garrett Wilson can absolutely cook anyone on this field. And so it only takes, a good game from Garrett Wilson to bring Aaron Rodgers along. And Aaron Rodgers, he's not what he once was, but I think he can still be as good once as he ever was. So I think he has 20-point upside in a Thursday night matchup, which is kind of sick. But if you need him, you can start him.
maybe gets that first 300-yard passing game since, guys, December 12th of 2021. Certainly been quite some time there, but still 10th in EPA per dropback this year. So we've seen far more good than bad out of Rodgers. Maybe we'll get again one of those vintage stat stuffing primetime performances here on Thursday Night Football. So guys, that's our quarterback rankings discussion. And now we're going to get to running backs. But first, a quick word to our friends over at Experian. Experian is to your finances what FantasyLife is to your fantasy league. It is a tool and resource designed to make your life easier. And how can we not all love that, guys? The Experian app is free to download and serves as a one-stop shop for managing your financial health. And with so many spending and subscription details to track, let Experian handle it for you. They'll help you find and cancel your unwanted or forgotten subscriptions, helping you save money and focus on what really matters, winning your fantasy league. Download the Experian app today. Just note results will vary. Not all subs are eligible. Savings not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account is required. And see Experian.com for details. Let's talk some RBs, fellas, and specifically one who, again, it's week 3. I'm not in the business of trying to ever victory lap, certainly not this early in the season, but Dwain Zamir White, someone that we didn't necessarily have too many good things to say about this offseason, but that was then, and this is now. Why is Zamir White rising up the ranks for you?
You hate him so much you can't even say his name. You can't even get it out. And like when I submitted this, it's kind of gross. This is a little gross. Like this could have potentially been thought of as a Sicko start, but we've got another name for you at running back at Sicko start. So Zamir White comes into the riser section. Look, we just follow the data on these things, and Zamir White, he hits the trifecta this week. Ian, number one, like we saw his utilization last week surge to 65% snap share. He had 53% route participation. Over the first 2 games, he's handled 61% of the Raiders' rushing attempts. Okay, now we have the Raiders who suddenly are kind of good as a passing unit. Will it hold up? Are they going to stay this pass heavy? I don't know, but I know they have 2 weapons in Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers that defenses are going to really have to pay attention to. I think there's going to be less focus on stopping the ground game. Early on, you're playing Antonio Pierce. The number one thing I think opposing coaches want to do is try to take away the run game and see if Gardner Minshew can beat them. Well, I think Minshew's proven enough now that you're going to have to allocate assets to trying to stop these passing game weapons. Jacoby Myers hasn't even had a good game yet, but he's a quality wide receiver that can actually beat coverage at the NFL level. So the Raiders have some weapons. I think that's good for Zamir White. And then the final thing, we've got Las Vegas as 6-point favorites this weekend against the Panthers defense that's giving up 200 yards per game. So you've got the matchup. So you're clicking all 3 boxes. You have no choice, but if you're following a process, like you have to move Zamir White up this week because the usage is there, the matchup is there. There's some nice things going on with the offense. I think he's got a shot this weekend, Ian, for somewhere between 15 and 20 opportunities between his carries and his targets through the air. Anytime you have that with a running back, at worst case, like you're looking at a low-end running back too, but I've actually upgraded him just a little bit past that. Like he's almost to mid-range RB2 territory this weekend. We'll still call it low-end, but I think he's pretty safely someone that you can start in your fantasy lineup, even if you've been disappointed with Zamir White in the first 2 games.
To be fair and give, some kudos to Zamir White, he has actually looked a little more spry this season. I mean, he's actually 10th in total missed tackles forced per touch. Pretty good numbers out there. So Freedman, looking at this Raiders team, man, obviously Gardner Minshew in the passing games and pressing. By the way, guys, they're a fantastic defense and special teams pickup because they're getting the Panthers this week, then the Browns, then the Broncos, then the Steelers, and then the aforementioned decimated Rams group. So we got to love that. But Freedman, are you kind of buying this success from the Raiders right now? Because on the one hand, Gardner Minshew is playing really well. And on the other hand, how long can we really expect Gardner Minshew to keep playing really well? So pretenders or contenders with the Raiders, Freedman?
I'm soft buying it so much to the point to where I'm legit thinking about playing them in Survivor this week. Now, like, do I want to do that? Do I want to put the future of my life in Gardner Minshew's hands with the Raiders as home favorites? No, I don't feel good about that, but I'm legit thinking about it. And looking at Zamir White, I think that he actually has the upside for more opportunities, like the upside for 25 opportunities in this game. Like he's been really impressive in, as you mentioned, kind of on an efficiency basis. He hasn't really dominated just in terms of like the raw usage or the stats, but I think that changes this week because of the matchup. In week 1, the Panthers allowed 172 yards, 2 touchdowns from scrimmage to Saints running backs. Last week, 201 yards and a touchdown to Chargers running backs. Last year, the Panthers were number 32 in defensive rush EPA and defensive rush DVOA. And now they're without defensive tackle Derek Brown. Even with Andy Dalton, theoretically able to help that offense sustain drives, which should help out their defense and limit opposing offenses, I still think we just see a really heavy ground attack from the Raiders. I think that means a lot of Zamir White, and I've moved him up to RB24. I'm buying White, and maybe for this week, I'm still buying the Raiders.
My RB21, I actually have him ranked higher than both of you. What a time to be alive. But yeah, Zamir White's certainly someone you should feel a bit more confident about slotting in that starting lineup than usual ahead of this objective smash spot. Now, fellas, the faller, someone that was regularly going off, off the board in round 2, maybe round 3 if you were lucky in fantasy drafts just a few short weeks ago. But Dwain, talk about Kyren Williams plummeting down the ranks. And I will say, makes sense that when the offensive line is screwing up Stafford in the passing game, yeah, the run game isn't all that great well off either.
Yeah, what's interesting, if you were to ask us, hey, Kyren Williams has not really been that good so far, like he's been a bust, what would we would probably assume that, Blake Corum took 30 or 40% of the rushing attempts, and this had turned him to more of a split backfield. It has nothing to do with that. Kyren Williams has an 8.3 utilization score. Guys, that would actually say that he should be regressing upward towards the mean. He's averaging 14.8 fantasy points per game. Guys that have been in that range have been more like 16.5 to 17 fantasy points per game historically over the last 4 seasons. The problem is all the things that Ian just mentioned. We don't have the weapons to move you up and down the field with Puka Nacua. Who's Puka Nacua? I don't know, but he's a really good player. Whenever you combine Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua together, that's what you get. That was hilarious. And then you have the offensive line issue. So just not a lot of upside here for touchdowns, not a lot of upside for efficiency given the problems they have. The 49ers, I know they had a weird game against the Vikings, and that kind of blew everyone away. But they have the resources on defense to say, you know what? We're not letting Kyren Williams beat us. We're going to see if Jordan Whittington and some of these other guys can come out and do it. And until they do, I suspect that they're going to allocate all the resources they need to stopping the Rams' best player on offense right now, and that is Kyren Williams. This game this is one of the lowest totals on the week as far as the team totals go, only 18 points. If you guys don't know what we mean when we say team total, we're talking about the Vegas over or under, then you've got the spread, and then you take that and apply it to the two teams. And in this case, we've got a 7-point underdog. And so that's how you get that 18 points. So that's really low. That's what you need to know. They're not expected to score a lot of points by odds makers, nor by myself. And I'm going to assume, Freedman, you as well. Do you have any different thoughts than me on Kyren? I've downgraded him to a mid-range running back 2, even though his utilization says he should be more like a mid-range running back 1.
Yeah, I will say that I'm a little bit of a sicko here and keeping the faith for one more week. But I mean, keeping the faith means high end-ish RB2. But as you mentioned, the utilization is there. And because he's on a team that has no other options, I think he's going to get fed a lot. I think he gets enhanced usage. And the 49ers, at least last year, number 30 in defensive rush success rate. And they've had a lot of turnover on the defensive line. So I don't think it's going to be pretty, but I could see a situation where he gets 75 yards, maybe 3.5, 4 receptions and a touchdown. And that's enough to make you not hate yourself for starting him.
Now, with Kyren, again, environment has not been good. Rams are one of only 12 teams averaging less than 1 yard before contact per carry, but he also really hasn't done much with 26 in yards per route run after finishing dead last in last season. Even next-gen stats, rushing yards over expected. We're talking about a bottom 10 at running back. So, yes, get that offensive line fixed, but Kyren also, man, got to put on for those fantasy managers here at some point. But now, everyone, it is time for Freedman's favorite. That's right, none other than Devin Achane. Someone that Freedman has 34.5 fantasy points this year from just receiving production. Breece Hall and Alvin Kamara are the only other guys over 20. So truly, despite not having all these, big explosive runs that we've seen, still making his money in the receiving game, something that maybe he'll be asked to do more than ever with Skylar Thompson now under center.
Yeah, if you can somehow acquire him in friends and family leagues, because like he hasn't had like that massive breakout game yet, and people could be scared about the Dolphins offense without Tua, whatever it is, I would just be sending out inquiries to try to get Dwain Achane, because last year he was an efficiency monster, right? 103 rush attempts. He had 8 runs of 20 plus yards, 5 runs of 40 plus yards. He had a league high 7.8 yards per attempt. It's been really different this year. He's yet to gain more than 17 yards on any carry. His rushing average has plummeted to a meager 3.8, but yet he still has 265 yards and 2 touchdowns from scrimmage, thanks to 32 carries and 14 targets. Like that's great volume, and the target volume, especially in half PPR and full PPR formats, makes him really attractive. No guarantee that we see Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson this week. 1 week after he got a career high 29 touches, he has 3 extra days of rest coming off of Thursday Night Football. Like he could have another 20, 25 touches this week, especially now because I think the team will rely on him even more without Tua Tagovailoa. And then last year, the Seahawks, number 2 in most fantasy points allowed to running backs. I know it's a different defensive system that he's going against, but I'm very much still on the idea that the Seahawks need to prove themselves as a unit that can stop runners, given that last week, even though they won, they allowed Patriots running backs 195 scrimmage yards and a touchdown. Achane at some point is going to have a high efficiency game tied with good volume. That could be this week.
Consensus top 7 RB from our team of rankers. So yeah, God forbid, guys, any start-sit questions involving Achane, the answer is always yes, get that man in your lineup. Dwayne, maybe not quite as clear with your Sicko RB start of the week, but again, that's why we do call it the Sicko start of the week. So talk about a high-priced free agent who has not exactly been playing like it. Talk about Bears RB1 DeAndre Swift going up against a Colts defense that has already been bad and also just lost to Forrest Buckner for at least the next 4 games.
Yes, placing a guy that's averaging 5.6 fantasy points into your lineup, that always feels really gross. And that's how DeAndre Swift falls into this Sicko range. He's not someone I could have considered putting in the Sicko start like 2 weeks ago because our expectations were different. But now expectations have been dampened so far on this player. And I'm just going to say this. Swift hasn't been great, but a lot of it just ties to the overall offense. There are systemic problems going on here, and this probably isn't making you guys feel any better. But what I'm going to say with Swift is like the underlying currents, like they're all there. The underpinnings of being able to give you a running back 2 week, 68% snap share, 67% in week 2. So those are the first 2 weeks. His utilization score is a 6.5, which has historically been right there at that low end running back 2 to high end running back 3 range. So everything is still there. We just need Shane Waldron, to be fired. That's not going to happen this week, but we just need him to come out and recognize, like, okay, when you don't have Rome Odunze healthy and you're missing Keenan Allen, we probably shouldn't be running 5 wide with your rookie quarterback whenever your offensive line can't block. When it's 3rd and 5. What's going to happen on that down? I think it's man coverage and a blitz, which your team hasn't picked up all night. Anyway, off the Shane Waldron soapbox. Again, another guy that's the opposite of Clint Kubiak, doing everything he can to demoralize and destroy his team. I said I was done. Apparently I'm not. This stuff just keeps coming out of me. But whenever you look at the Colts, it is a good matchup, all right? 237 yards per game they've given up on the ground, not passing, on the ground. The Colts have given up that much yardage, and you just mentioned it, Ian, really probably their best defensive player, DeForest Buckner on the defensive line, is now out. He's their beef in the middle, so I think there's an opportunity here as long as Swift continues to get that utilization, which I think he will for another week. I think he's a guy that can scratch out 15 fantasy points for you. So if you're hurting, don't be afraid. I know it feels gross, but he's the kind of guy you can put into your running back 2 or potentially your flex with all these injuries.
2 separate running backs, though. So yeah, if he's ever going to get it done, guys, would make sense if this is the week. So some more wide receiver rankings talk on the way. But first, a quick word from our friends over at DraftKings. Hey everyone, with the football season kicking off, it is the perfect time to dive into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $250 in bonus bets plus 1 month of NFL Plus premium on us. That is something we can all celebrate. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today and sign up using our promo code FantasyLife. The crown is yours. And stay in on the action. Use your $250 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. Sports betting is not yet available in your state. Don't worry, you can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FantasyLife and bet just $5 on any wager to get $250 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FantasyLife only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Wide receivers, gentlemen, and one of them, Dwain, has not been performing up to the standards that he set last year and certainly his fantasy managers were hoping for. But maybe, just maybe, this is the week everything goes right. Talk about alleged 49ers wide receiver one, Brandon Aiyuk, and what could be on the table with Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey out of the offense.
Yeah, the hold-ins, hold-outs, they've all struggled a little bit over these first two games. Interesting that you kind of got to get rhythm maybe with your quarterback and be on the practice field. Those sort of things matter. But we've now, we've got 2 weeks, 3 weeks of that under our belt. We're heading into week 3. I think those issues will move to the side for Brandon Aiyuk. But the big thing here, Ian, is we don't have Deebo Samuel most likely this weekend. Aiyuk, over the last 3 seasons on plays without Deebo Samuel on the field, has a 29% target share, so almost a third for his team, 45% of the team's air yards, which correlates highly with fantasy football points, and he has 2.92 yards per route run, which is high-end wide receiver one territory. So essentially, when we've had Brandon Aiyuk on the field without Deebo Samuel, he has been a high-end wide receiver one. And oh, look who he's going to get to play. The team that's going to crush Matt Freedman's soul and his bet. He's playing the Rams. The Rams are giving up the 5th most points per game to opposing receivers, including tight ends, at 32.2. They just don't have a defender that can cover Aiyuk. Guys, go look at the depth chart. You're going to see it. If you go look at the PFF grades, your eyes are going to light up like green dollar signs. Ayuk's going to have matchups all over the field. And now this offense is really just going to be condensed down to Aiyuk and George Kittle, because not only are we going to be without Deebo Samuel, we also know we're without CMC. So I took him out just for the fun of it, Ian. Now the sample gets small, so small sample alert, guys. The other one was almost 250 routes. This one was like 70 routes, but his target share shot up to 34% when you had plays without Deebo and CMC on the field. So it's just going to be a monster game for Aiyuk. I mean, I kept just moving him up. Every time I would get to a name in the ranks, I'm like, would I start him over him? I'm like, yep. Would I start him over him? Yep. So he upgrades into the wide receiver one conversation, even though he hasn't even been a wide receiver 3 yet this season, but he is a wide receiver 1 this week, Brandon Aiyuk.
Dwain and I both have Aiyuk at wide receiver 8, so it seems like we went through a similar process getting him up there. And again, how could you not? Rams league worst marks in yards per attempt and explosive pass play rate allowed through 2 weeks of action. So again, that's the riser. Now the faller is going to be a pair of wide receivers out of Miami. Again, just mentioned the easiest matchup of the slate. And so far, again, as Dwain said, small sample alert here. The Seahawks have actually been the best pass defense in the league, allowing a league low 4.2 yards per attempt and a 4.8% explosive pass play rate. So yeah, that's also what happens when you get to face the Broncos and Patriots during the first 2 weeks. But Freedman, can't stress enough, man, just going from Tua Tagovailoa to Skylar Thompson, this does mean big time downgrades for both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially Waddle. I mean, if you have these guys, you are probably starting them, but Waddle becomes much more of a wide receiver 3. Tyreek Hill, I mean, I still say he's a low end wide receiver 1 because of the talent and the volume we should still expect him to get. In the 7 games he's had with quarterback Skylar Thompson, so let's say the 7 games in which Thompson has played at least 20 snaps, Hill has still had 9.1 targets. Like, if he has that kind of volume and given the talent he has, even against a Seahawks defense that is improved against the pass, I would still expect Tyreek to be a low-end wide receiver 1, but that board. So certainly a downgrade, but still someone that you should be starting. Jalen Waddle, much more on the borderline, just depending on how you drafted in terms of whether you actually want to have him in your lineup this week.
In 2 games with Skylar Thompson starting and playing for the duration of the contest, Jalen Waddle, 44 scoreless yards in each. So, Dwain, you have him ranked as your wide receiver 28. I have him ranked as my wide receiver 29. But I will say, man, as I was getting some start-sit questions yesterday, Waddle versus Jackson Smith and the Jigba, Waddle versus Deontay Johnson, like, it's close, man. And for, the first time in a long time, Waddle really does not need to be in starting lineups of all shapes and sizes.
That's right. And I'm going to tighten up the ranking some more because I've been thinking through some of those things as well. Like I'm going to work on that some more later today. Waddle can totally go on your bench. If you've got someone, and it doesn't even need to be that well thought out. If you've just got a feeling about someone and you don't feel good about Jalen Waddle, and there are good reasons for that, just bench him. Like, I mean, you're for sure putting guys that have broken out early in the season and played really well. You know you're putting in your JMOs. You know you're putting in your Rashid Shaheeds. Those guys are all obviously over Waddle. We've got them ranked as such. But to your point, Ian, when you get into that mix there of the ranks, there's quite a few names that you could talk yourself into over Waddle. I think once you get to Deontay Johnson, I'm stopping. Because, I mean, Andy Dalton, yeah, we know he can at least – he can lead an attack, but is it going to be that much better than Skylar Thompson and a Mike McDaniel scheme? They're probably going to both throw for 200 yards. So just give me Jalen Waddle because he's the more explosive player. And then I'm with Freedman. I'm a little lower on Tyreek Hill. I have him as a high-end wide receiver too. But like Freedman said, he gets his target still with Skylar Thompson, and he's so good he can still break that long one at any time. And we've also seen, from Tyreek Hill, he's done this not just here, but he's done it with other teams, with the Chiefs, whenever he's had the backup quarterback, still managed to put up fantasy production. The big thing is here, you don't have the upside for a 350-yard explosion passing game. Or if it happens, it's going to be an extreme outlier. With Tua, like that can happen any game. And then also the floor of hitting a 150-yard passing outing. Like that is so much more of a likely outcome now with Skylar Thompson. So everything just shifts. Upside comes down. Floor also falls for both of these players.
And honestly, just through 2 weeks of action, it's been a little bit more split in terms of the targets than we expected. I mean, Tyreek's leading the way, obviously, with 18, but in second's Devin Achane at 14, and even ahead of Jalen Waddle in fourth place is actually Jonnu Smith with 10 targets through, again, 2 weeks of action. So small samples, all that, I get it, but for now, Devin Achane really making life tough on those Dolphins wide receivers. But now, guys, it is time for Freedman's favorite, and yes, he hasn't exactly balled out these first 2 weeks of the year, but I think we are all old enough to remember last year when Jamar Chase also went 2 straight scoreless games to start the season and then exploded for 141 in week 3. So Freedman, talk about a Monday Night Football potential explosion from Jamar Chase and his Bengals passing attack.
Yeah, I just felt the need to sort of remind people, hey, Jamar Chase is good. And I know he had the hold in. He hasn't looked good through 2 weeks. And initially I ranked him as my wide receiver 5. And then I was like, no, he's still Jamar Chase and he's going against the Commanders. I've moved him up to my wide receiver 1. Maybe that's a little bit aggressive, but he's still one of the best wide receivers. And the Commanders last year, number 32 in defensive dropback EPA, number 32 in defensive pass DVOA against number 1 wide receivers, number 1 in largest fantasy point boost allowed to wide receivers, one of the metrics that we have at FantasyLife. They have just absolutely been torn up by wide receivers the past 2 weeks. This is the bounce back spot for Jamar Chase. Do not lose the faith. Trade for him now if you can before he has the big bounce back game.
Dwayne, you have Chase as your wide receiver 2. I have him as my wide receiver 4, man. I'm kind of feeling like a coward now.
Well, look, man, he's playing the Commanders, which is all you need to know. I mean, you guys remember, right, what we had here. Mike Evans this year, 23.1 fantasy points. Chris Godwin, 22.3. Last week, Malik Neighbors went for 28.7. Jamar Chase is about to drop a 30 bomb. Like, that's what's about to happen.
Or maybe Andre Yoshivas will. Because I will say, guys, it is shocking how little usage Chase has at this point. Jamar Chase is 5th on his own team in air yards right now. Mike Gesicki, Andre Yoshivas, Trenton Irwin, and even Jermaine Burton all have more than Chase. So I'm pretty sure that stat won't.
But you know better than all that.
Yes, I do. And for that reason, Jamar Chase going off on Monday Night Football. You heard it here first, maybe second, maybe last. Either way, you certainly heard it. It is time, though, for our Sicko start of the week. Dwayne, a Rams wide receiver, but maybe not the one everyone is thinking of. Talk about rookie Jordan Whittington and what could maybe be on the table this week with, again, a passing game that is absolutely decimated by injury at the moment.
Yeah, so this is as Sicko gets. And this is assuming you're playing in a 14-teamer. You guys are starting, like 3 wide receivers, 3 flex, that sort of thing. So if you're in an 8-team league and you're listening to this, do not go pick up Jordan Whittington and start him. There should be no reason you would ever have to do this. You've got to be in a really gross league to do this. Route participation rate slot. So I know. He took on the Cooper Kupp role, Ian. And it's funny. We say that tongue in cheek. Not just anyone can step in and be Cooper Kupp. But if anyone can scheme up a player, it is Sean McVay. And he's shown an ability to do that. Tyler Johnson really is his only target share competition from the slot. Demarcus Robinson, he's just a guy. Like he's a number 3 NFL wide receiver, which makes him like a wide receiver 5 in fantasy football. He's going to be out there all the time. But if I had to pick one of these guys and put a chip on him, Ian, I'm putting them in my lineup so I can walk out in front of my league mates, do the mic drop, and say that I really knew what I was doing. The guy that could score 20 points in a PPR league this weekend, it is Jordan Whittington. And guess what? If you miss, no one will even notice. They'll just be like, wow, that was ballsy. But if you hit it, you get to let everyone in your league know what a genius you are. So Jordan Whittington is the name.
This year on the Rams, only Cooper Kupp and Jordan Whittington have actually been given a design screen, and Whittington actually had a rushing touchdown in week 1 that got nullified. So I am with you and him playing that Puka the Cooper Kupp role, as you were saying earlier, Dwayne.
I don't remember how I said
again,
it now.
Well, it was provocative, whatever you were trying to say
Puka
out there.
the
So
Kupp.
appreciate you there. Yeah, Puka the Kupp. There we go. So yeah, maybe Jordan Whitting Cup or something. We'll workshop that one a little bit as well. So guys, a couple more tight end starts on the way. But first, a quick word to our friends over at New Era. Freaking love these New Era caps. What's up, fantasy football fanatics? There's a new era at FantasyLife. Gear up for kickoff with the official cap of NFL sidelines from New Era Cap. This weekend's matchups are packed with fantasy implications, and no matter which stars or teams you're backing, New Era has the gear you'll need to keep you in the game. From classic fitted caps to iconic snapbacks, New Era's premium designs and comfort let you showcase your team pride and style. Elevate your game day look now with the official cap of NFL sidelines from New Era Cap. Fellas, tight ends and Freedman, your favorite happens to be none other than rookie Brock Bowers, currently fresh off the best 2-game stretch to start a career in terms of receiving yards by any tight end in NFL history. So now facing the Carolina Panthers defense we don't think particularly high of. How high is too high to rank Brock Bowers, Freedman?
Number 1 or number 2 is probably a massive capitulation. 12 and redraft, but that was mainly just because you kind of had to. But he is incredibly been impressive to this point in the season. His route rate, 71%, isn't necessarily elite, but he's just gotten so much volume that he has a position best 8.9 utilization score. He's leveraged that into a really impressive 156 yards on 17 targets. The Panthers last year, number 29 in defensive pass DVOA against tight ends. I think it kind of doesn't matter which defender they ultimately end up putting on him on any given play. He is going to have an edge. So I was wrong about Bowers. I thought he would have a good NFL career. I did not think it was going to start this quickly. Super impressive what we've seen from him so far.
Clear tier 1 of tight ends in our consensus ranks. Trey McBride, George Kittle, Brock Bowers, Sam Laporta, and Travis Kelce. Those are your quote-unquote elite tight ends as it stands here ahead of week 3. Finally, though, Dwayne, if you don't have an elite tight end, you might have to get a little sick out there on the waiver wire, and you're recommending another Thursday night player. Talk about Jets tight end 1, Tyler Conklin, and what he could potentially do against his Patriots secondary.
Yeah, Sicko start number 4. I had to go away from Zach Ertz because I've used him for 2 weeks. So if Zach Ertz is available, I still recommend him. Hunter Henry, I would recommend over this name. But if not, this is really a player that should be in the same tier as those guys. Ian, Tyler Conklin, if you look at his career target earning shares, they're very similar to the 2 players we just mentioned. Right now, he's tight end 46 on the season, but he's 3rd in route participation. Historically, going back 10 years, if you're just an 80% plus route participation tight end, you're typically a low-end tight end 1 almost always, 80% of the time, just on that number alone. So really, Conklin's targets just haven't come yet. And so I'm giving you guys the chance to stack Aaron Rodgers and Tyler Conklin and either feel great on a Thursday night and pointing at your league mates, look at me, look where I'm at, look at the bold calls I made, or your game could be over and you may have lost, and then you could just go hang out with your family. So there's a win-win situation either way. It's just all in the matter of how you look at it, Mr. Hartitz.
Thursday night duds might hurt that much worse in Fantasyland, but the bold call that works out, and all of a sudden you get to enter Friday in the weekend with those 15 points from Tyler Conklin. That is just LIV living out there, Dwayne. So you know what? Maybe, just maybe, Tyler Conklin is the guy we all need to get behind in week 3. But hey, plenty more goodness coming up on the Fantasy Life show. Dwayne and I are going to be back in your lives tomorrow going over all the fantasy relevant injuries. And of course, Freeman, myself, and the rest of our rankers will have you guys ready to go for week 3. So stay tuned for all that, FantasyLife.com, and otherwise just have a great freaking day. So for Freedman, for Dwayne, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I am Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life show, and until next time, take care, everybody.